I am Brad Keelor. He is Roberto Rodriguez. Next up on Director's Cut, he tells us about the first time he ever saw snow. Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Director's Cut. My name is Brad Keelor. I'm the director of the Geo-Institute, and that is why we call this show Director's Cut. Every single week, I sit down with a different GI member who has stories to tell. Some of them are personal, some are professional, but all of them are fun. If you don't know anything about the Geo-Institute, after you watch this today, you can head over to geo-institute.org, and there you will find out we are a technical society with about 12,000 members, most of whom are geotechnical engineers and or geologists, and we are part of the American Society of Civil Engineers. If you like what you see today, and I always say I think you will, you should do a few things. You can click like, you can click subscribe, you can click get notifications, and if you do those things in that order, we will let you know every time we post something to the YouTube channel. With that out of the way, we can welcome our guest for this week, coming to us from the city so nice they named it twice. New York, New York. It's Roberto Rodriguez, who is a geotechnical engineer at Arup. Roberto, thank you for doing this.
Yeah, thank you, Brad. I'm very happy to be here.
We're going to have a great time today. We have 10 questions, just like we do every week. And then, sometimes we have those great bonus questions thrown in. We start with one of the two questions that we ask everybody when they come on the show. Describe your job in 45 seconds.
Well, let me tell you what I've been up to here in New York. I'm a geotechnical engineer working for Arup. I get to work on interesting projects all throughout the U.S. Currently, my focus is on private sector clients and some design build services. Part of my job, I get to go out in the field sometimes, but most of the time I'm in the office writing geotechnical reports or designing foundations, some calculations. And I also recently just moved here from Miami, which is my hometown.
And we are going to talk a little bit more about that as we go through the interview, because as you noted, I don't know if anybody else has noticed this, you're the first guest we've had on Director's Cut from Miami. We're on like the 92nd episode or something, and you're the first one, so we have to ask you questions about that.
Right, there are geotechnical engineers in Miami. Yes.
Yeah, we're gonna prove that by the end of this interview. We have to ask fun questions on Director's Cut too. And for somebody who spent the majority of their life in South Florida, this is a natural. When was the first time you saw snow?
Well, that's a funny question. The first time I saw snow was in New York, but it was on a project site in JFK Airport where we were performing quality assurance services for the client Delta Airlines. And I remember I had to be out there for about 8 hours in snow. It was pretty bad. It snowed like 4 inches that day. I remember the news the day before that there was a snowstorm coming on its way through the Northeast, and didn't know if there would be any field work that day, so it would be canceled or not. So I took the phone number of a coworker just in case. And I remember in the morning there's a text message at like 5 a.m. It's like, hey, they're gonna start driving piles over there at JFK. Be there at 7 a.m. So I got like 2 layers of clothing on. And I walked outside and I could just see the snow falling like little by little and stepping on the snow all the way to the subway. And I was just worried that the train would like derail or something when I got out of the tunnel to JFK. But everything was completely normal. Everything was fine. And I remember going out there to the field and waiting out there, all like bundled up, waiting for them to start. And they did start. They just got a blowtorch and they melted the snow. And then they found the sticks in the ground. They started driving piles like it was normal. So I think that was quite amazing. And first time I saw snow was on a project site.
That's pretty awesome. I don't know where the line is where people stop freaking out about snow. I think it's somewhere between DC and Philadelphia, because like it snows here, but people still panic. And if we had gotten 4 inches of snow here and you had had a project here, you would not have been working that day. I can guarantee you that, because everybody would have stayed home.
Yeah, I don't know where the line is actually. We haven't crossed that line yet in New York yet.
No, it's amazing. Like people just, I mean, I told you I'm from Michigan, so I guess we were used to it there. But down here in Virginia and DC, nah, everything stops. So we are going to ask a few questions about Miami, including your technical one here. And you had the opportunity to work on a pretty cool project down there. And I mean, I really liked this one when you described it because I felt like there were very various different aspects that maybe people in a lot of the country haven't had to deal with. So what was your experience like on that 395 project?
Yeah, so my background is I worked a lot on FDOT projects throughout my career. And I believe that the research that the FDOT does and actively performs speaks to the challenges and innovations happening in the Florida geotechnical world. So when I worked on the 395 signature project in downtown Miami, it was one of the first use of auger cast in place piles, ACIP, on a federally funded highway bridge project in the U.S. Originally, we did perform the pilot test program that was performed and indicated that driven piles would not give sufficient adequate geotechnical capacity, and the drill shafts down there, typically the slurry kind of interacts with the limestone that doesn't give a high capacity. So, and also the drill shafts would have made it larger pile caps that would interfere with the roadway of the bridge. So then auger cast piles proposed as an innovative solution, and the FDOT went on board with that. The first big project that they were going to implement their technology, and that was made possible through the use of thermal integrity tip wires, automated monitoring equipment on the drill rigs, drop hammer dynamic testing on production piles, and bidirectional static load testing. And I think it was quite interesting that the FDOT gave like a preliminary resistance factors, and there was none in the ASCU of I think it was like 0.6 in compression and 0.5 in tension. And they continue to kind of refine those calibration factors with like measure while drilling, which is where they're measuring the auger penetration rate and torque to kind of correlate that to the capacity of limestone, which I think is kind of innovative and kind of unique to Florida. I think that's kind of the future, the way that's going. I think the other bullet point I had to talk about sort of research technical question was I believe it's worth mentioning that the use of shallow foundations in South Florida is kind of tricky. Currently, the practice is to evaluate limestone using bearing capacity equations for rock, using a factor of safety of like, let's say 5, but everyone knows that's not really applied to limestone because it's a soft rock and the whole Brown criterion doesn't really apply. And then calculate the bearing capacity as a granular material, you're assuming like a high friction angle, let's say 38 degrees conservative, and then apply like a factor of safety of 3, and you take the lowest of that, and then you do another fudge factor and you say it's 10 KSF to use that for design. But I think that one day the FDOT wants to have the ambitions of making it more like analytical to derive soil parameters and calculate the bearing capacity of limestone. I think that would be a very good innovation. So I think in South Florida, we don't really do a lot with like consolidation problems of soil or slope stability as much. But I think there is an innovative geotechnical foundation work going on.
So the 2 follow-up questions I guess I have for that is, one, it doesn't sound like you guys needed to use any torches to heat anything up for that 395 signature project. There was definitely no snow.
Not at all. No torches. Everything happened right in sunny South Florida.
And then the second one, this is one I never thought about, but your shallow foundations question made me think of it. Especially for residential construction in South Florida, how common are basements? I mean, what is most housing stock built on down there?
But I mean, typically some parts of the city you might have like the limestone is a little thicker at the top for the Miami limestone layer. So some areas like Coral Gables, Coconut Grove, you have basements and they're easily constructed. Because the shallow groundwater is a big problem over there.
Okay.
To control that. So other locations, it still is possible using like secant pile construction to make a bathtub essentially, and then you can construct your basements like that. But that's quite a lot of work. I think the deepest now they're working on a three-story basement in downtown Miami, which is pretty deep. I think they had only reached 2 before, but it's quite interesting the work they're doing out there for basements as well.
Very cool. So another thing that we make sure we do on Director's Cut is every guest has to think back about something, right? The first one that we're going to make you think about here is, what nickname did you have when you were a kid? And why?
Maybe kind of a short story, but my nickname my parents gave me as a little kid was Robertico, which is like son of Roberto, and it's because my dad's name is also Roberto Rodriguez. So I'm like the small version of him, like Robert Jr. So kind of the nickname I've always had.
Did you ever have one with your friends or anything? Or because I know a lot of kids, I think you assume, oh, everyone has a nickname, but really it's only a few kids and they have crazy nicknames, and that's why you remember them.
Yeah, I mean, I had like some nicknames, but I can't remember them off the top of my head what they were. I guess it kind of depends on each person if they got a nickname or not. But I kind of been the person that's always been called like Roby or Robertico, which is like Spanish short version of Roberto. So kind of like what I've always had. Like something like my name got shortened down from like Roberto to like Robert, and then from Robert to like Rob, and then kept getting shortened down. So,
And there's only so far you can go once you get down to that.
Exactly.
So one of the, I think, like a hidden gem in the Miami area is Florida International University. I had the privilege of visiting there several years ago, both to go to the National Hurricane Center, but to meet with a couple of the academic departments. And I had no idea what a big school it is. You went there for undergrad. What was your favorite thing about your time at FIU, and what made it really unique?
Well, yeah, I completed my undergraduate education at Florida International University, FIU, and my graduate studies at UCLA for geotechnical engineering. And maybe I could talk a little about my favorite part of each of them as well.
Sure.
So my favorite part at FIU was Panther Camp. I participated in as a freshman. The Panther Camp is like a 3-day camp where you go to Lake Placid in Central Florida, and you make new friendships. You meet other incoming freshmen. You foster school spirit. You work on your leadership skills. And I think it was really cool because I remember getting to meet so many friends on just such a little time, that it made my transition to university life very, very fast. I think I had met maybe like 10 or so friends the first 3 days at Panther Camp. And then once I got back to university, I met like all those people's friends.
Yeah.
And then before I knew it, I was a popular kid for the first year. So kind of was a very cool experience that I've always had, and very, very fond memories I've had of that. So very happy that I participated in Panther Camp when I was an undergrad. And I think for UCLA, I think my fun moments I joined the hiking and running club out there. I think I wanted a little bit of escape from graduate studies and the professors. So I made my effort to go on a hike like once every couple of weeks, and I did the running club. So I think my favorite hike was one I did in the Los Angeles State Park or so, and we did like a 6-mile hike, and then at the end there was like a waterfall, and I can remember just thinking like, well, in Florida we don't have this. This is like new to me. Like we never used to go on hikes. I mean, most we have is like trails. So it made me very happy that I got to enjoy all that, and I've always been a avid runner, and I joined run clubs in New York. I joined run clubs in Miami. I did the Brickell Run Club and the Chinatown Run Club here. So I'm always fond of trying to stay active as much as I can. So
we were talking about this a little bit before we recorded. We're both from very humid places. What was it like for you to be able to run with no humidity in California? That had to be amazing.
Yeah, that was amazing. I feel like that's what made me even more active over there than I was over here, because over there I can run, I can hike almost every day without having to worry about sweating it off, and I figured I could run like a 6-minute mile if I had to. So it was really, really good, and I remember that. And actually, if I think about it now, that might have been the first time I actually saw snow on a mountain peak in LA.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I didn't actually touch it though.
Yeah, that's not so up close. Now, the other thing before we started recording is you gave the names of the professors that you were trying to escape with the running. We have to do a couple of shout outs. So who were your faculty advisors when you were in your master's program?
Yeah, Dr. Brandenburg, Dr. Stewart, and Dr. Gusetic. So I think you did a director's cut with Brandenburg the other couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, it's been a while, but They need the shout outs, Roberto. So they need to know this is how you stayed sane while you were in their program.
Exactly.
We also have to mention before we leave that question that the other day started Hispanic Heritage Month. FIU is the largest Hispanic serving institution in the United States, and it's almost, I think, 40,000 undergrads now. You want to talk a little bit about what that means, I think, especially to the community in South Florida?
Yeah, I think it definitely speaks to the community of South Florida. It's very much a Hispanic community, not just Cubans. There's other ethnicities there as well. And I think that, typically some people want to go to FIU as their first undergraduate experience, their first university experience, and they tend to go to South Florida. So there is a large population of Hispanics at the university, but there's also in Florida International. So you have people from all around the world, from the Middle East, from Europe, from South America, other parts of the world that come to study at FIU. It's one of their first choices to study abroad. So I think that kind of really adds to the university and makes it a more, cultural experience and diverse experience for everyone.
And it sounds like, based on what you said, and I mean, based on what I've seen, it was a great undergrad experience. So the other question we ask everybody when they come on the show is, how did you first get involved with ASCE and GI?
Well, I first got involved with ASCE when I was an undergraduate at FIU. Senior year, I participated in the regional competition, and I helped out a lot with the steel bridge design. I remember having to, work at night doing like a stat model or trying to do some calculations for that. But I ultimately got involved more with the surveying of all things. I was a TA for surveying at the time, and no one else was participating in that competition, so they needed someone to help out. And I did my part there during the competition there through basically the steel bridge and surveying. And then I got involved through the Geo-Institute backtrack there. I think through the Geo Wall at the time at FIU was not really as active, although I would have wanted to be more active. But I think this year, I mean, these years I've heard that they are participating in Geo Wall. And with the Geo Institute, I got part of it a stroke of luck, I believe. So I was an avid runner, and I did a Brickle Run Club so many times that I actually met my friend Santiago, who was the chair of the GI chapter of Miami-Dade. And then he kind of brought me aboard to be a member, and I've been a member ever since. So I think it's a small world out there, but I guess luckily I kind of got pulled into the GI as well as a professional.
And then you got involved in the local chapter in Miami. You were on the board, correct?
Yeah, I was on the board still am participating in the board. But we have about 10 members. It was pretty small when it started, but it's been growing ever since. So I'm very happy for that, and hopefully it continues to grow as more members join the board. So yeah, it's a very good group of people.
So I think we can tell the people that there's a lesson to be had there, that you should always be physically active, and you should always, I'll say it too. I like running. You should always run. You never know what good thing is going to happen in your life from running.
Right.
Get involved with the GI for life.
Exactly. That's what I just tell people now.
And then the other thing is we're now up to 60 chapters across the U.S. So for all of our viewers out there, if you don't know where your local chapter is, go to geo-institute.org. You can find it there, and we are happy to help you. If you can't locate one near you, we can help you get involved. On to the final few questions here. I don't know where I came up with this one, but it's one that I haven't asked anybody yet. Do you remember the worst thing that you've ever tasted in your life?
Well, that's a good question, Brad. Unfortunately, I don't think I have any bad experiences with food. I love eating
which is also the correct answer. So
I love eating all types of food. I think I could discuss some types of food that I enjoy eating, if that's okay.
Bring it on.
Well, since I grew up in Miami, I really like Cuban food, and I've always liked the bistec palomilla, which is like a flattened steak, which is really good with onions and rice and beans and plantains. But some more exciting types of food I recently got introduced to hot pot in New York, which is like a Chinese cooking method where they heat up the pot and soup in front of you, and they add like noodles, different quality meats in there, like pork and steak and seafood, and then they spice it up for you with different spices and vegetables and broth flavors. It's really amazing. I think you should try it. So
I would also second that. Hot pot is fantastic. Everybody should find a hot pot restaurant near them, even if you have to drive 5 hours to get it because you don't have one by you. It's probably worth it. Or anytime you're in some place where there are a lot of hot pot restaurants, you should definitely do it. That was an amazing answer, by the way, and I really like that. I'm glad you haven't had a horrible experience and had to taste anything bad.
yeah, maybe.
We have a couple more questions, and two of them are Miami related, and we might throw a little curveball in here and then ask about your experiences in New York so far, too. We touched on this a little bit earlier, but now we're going to go in depth with it a little bit more. What makes the Miami area so unique in terms of geotechnical projects?
Well, I believe the Miami area is unique in terms of geotechnical projects because the geology is very different. With other parts of the country, we have like a karst geology, but one that's not very typical of forming sinkholes. And then our geology is typically like a top layer of sand, underlain by the Miami limestone formation, underlain by another layer of sand, and then the Fort Thompson formation, and so on. So I think that kind of speaks to the type of projects that we work on, the type of foundations that we choose. A lot of times the autocast piles are king because of the high side friction capacities that we get, but at the same time, it's also things that we don't really have much of. Like we don't really have much clays in my issues, and so we deal with different types of geotechnical problems that we're typically used to. So I think kind of that speaks to kind of like where we are more granular material, and settlement's not really too big an issue. Lateral capacity is not really that big an issue. So we're kind of focused more on trying to correlate our actual capacities from limestone to that of the real world.
So where does Sinkhole Country begin then? Because I know Central Florida has major issues with this. Everybody might remember several years ago Tiger Woods' dining room in Orlando collapsing because of it. How far inland do you need to go before you start getting into that?
Well, what I've heard is that I think like sinkholes begin in Tampa region.
Okay.
Around there, they have a lot of water draw down for the city, and that kind of tends to cause sinkholes in the Tampa area, which is part of the Central Florida area where there's a lot of sinkholes. Probably the most is in Central Florida. But I've heard of sinkholes possibly being as far north as Tallahassee, and maybe deeper in depth sinkholes, but that definitely is possible. So I haven't fortunately dealt with too many sinkholes. I think the only sinkhole or cavern I've seen was in Miami was in Bridge 2 of 395 project, where they found a big cavern, and it became a big deal because the bridge was in the way, and they had to contact the FDOT to bring down some geophysical testing to map out the cavern, and decided they want to fill it with concrete and not fill it with concrete. So it became a really big task there.
Oh, wow. That's a good little story to tack onto the end. I like that. We've got two questions left. Both of them are fun ones. I mean, they're all fun questions, but these are both specifically fun questions. Do you have any item that's interesting that you keep with you all the time, either superstition or just something you always have to have with you?
Well, I do carry around my dad's necklace that he gave to me before I passed away, so I carry that around all the time. And I used to also carry my keychain used to have a helicopter engine piece on it.
Wow.
that he gave to me because he was a machinist. So it's kind of like the two things I've always carried around with me ever since. But it's kind of like what a story I have, really. I don't know how many people carry things around, but yeah.
Well, you'd be surprised, which is why that question was in there. Do you still have the helicopter piece? It's just not on your keychain?
No, I don't know what happened to it, to be honest. I used to have it for like at least like 10 years or so.
Oh, wow.
But it was really cool because there was like a little piece that would go, the keychain would go right through it, and it had the hole already punched for the piece, or that was the helicopter piece the way it was. But it was pretty cool. Yeah.
That is amazing. And it's amazing that it lasted so long too, I think, because a lot of that's, keychains, regular old keychains are not meant to last that long. So that's a super cool use of that.
Hmm.
So with all the time you spent in Miami, we have to take advantage of this a little bit while you're on here and while you're in front of us. Miami gets a lot of tourists. They all tend to go to the same places, I think. For you, what are some of the coolest things in Miami that tourists never see when they go there?
Well, I believe tourists, whenever they go to Miami, they always got to experience South Beach, and that's the place that most people go. Well, that's the place that locals tend to flock away from. And I think tourists should venture out to other neighborhoods and some more quiet beaches when they're visiting. I know that it's changing now, and some tourists are now going to Wynwood, which is like a more hip, artistic area, which is like a part of town with a lot of restaurants and nightlife, and some other neighborhoods like Brickell, Coconut Grove, Little Havana, and Coral Gables. But in terms of the coolest things, I think to me, I like Gaiocho because it has like the Cuban culture, a Cuban community, and really good food. Some of my favorite restaurants are out there. But in terms of like things that people do in Miami, I think it's always a little touristy unless you can rent a charter boat. I think that's one of the things that we did with my friend. We rent a boat and then go to the sandbar. Some other cool things people do is like go on cruises, rent jet skis, airboat to the Everglades, watch a Miami Heat game, which is always a very fun thing to do in the FTX arena. But yeah, I agree, Brad, that most things in Miami are kind of touristy. What people do, it's kind of it's kind of touristy city. So.
And you went with going to the Heat game, not the Marlins. You're not one of the 650 people who goes to a Marlins game.
Maybe one of those few people that go to the Marlins game. I've gone a couple of times, and the tickets were actually pretty cheap. So kind of.
That's an endorsement right there. You should, and you can probably get great seats on almost any day that you want to go to a Marlins game.
Yeah, maybe I can see the Miami versus the Yankees.
Anytime you want. Roberto, that was great. You made it through all 10 questions on Director's Cut. You did a great job. For our viewers, thanks for sticking with us till the end. If you liked this, and again, you did stay till the end, so you probably did, click like, click subscribe, click get notifications, and we will let you know every single time we post something to the YouTube channel. Roberto, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Brad.
I hope it was fun. I hope you don't have to see snow too many more times in your life and your time in New York. For all of our viewers, we'll be back again next week with a brand new Director's Cut.